Hello and welcome to Albion Community's third author workshop with me, Fraser, from the schools team. Thank you so much for joining us. Over the past couple of weeks, we've spoken to a couple of authors, Ben Littleton and Tom Palmer, who've told us what it's like to be an author and a bit about their books. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Dan Freedman, the author of the popular Jamie Johnson series. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Very good, Fraser. Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to this. Brighton has got a special place in my heart. My dad was born there, so I'm always, thinking about it in a positive way.
Fantastic. Yeah, good to see you. Could you, now, I imagine most of our viewers know about you and about Jamie and about your books, but could you just explain a little bit about your books for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, I've written 9 books, 8 in the Jamie Johnson series, and then 1 standalone called Unstoppable. Jamie Johnson is the story of a kid with very, very normal challenges in his life. They're not easy, but they are quite commonplace. He struggles to control his emotions. He lives at home with his mum. His dad is not around. His granddad is like his male role model. He's got a best friend, a girl called Jack, who is an incredible character and a bit of a leader, and she's the one that can get through to him when he's maybe struggling to understand the world and his place in it. So these are all quite normal elements. At school he can struggle at times academically, but then on the other side he's an incredible footballer with the ability to be whoever he wants in the game. And so the books follow his journey from school, trying to be the next Messi, the next Ronaldo. And we go from, when he's 11 years old, as I say, there are 8 books in the series, from when he's 11 years old at school through to playing in World Cups and Champions Leagues, and see his whole journey in between. And Unstoppable is a little bit old. It's probably for 11 years old and above. And that's a story about 2 twins, Kane and Roxy, who are vying for attention within their own family. Again, they're both incredible at sport, but the pressures on the family mean there has to be a choice made. And that choice ends up with Roxy being under huge amounts of pressure, and her mental well-being is in question. And Kane feeling abandoned and angry, and his safety being in question, put against the backdrop of their ambitions and athleticism as well, and desire. So it's a bit more of an intense, tension-filled story, that one.
Cool. I'm used to delivering lessons around the Jamie Johnson series, but I also ordered them at the start of lockdown, and I've managed to work my way through them. It only took me about a week. I was absolutely gripped. So I've got through them myself recently, which is brilliant.
That is great. And we'll be talking about reading, quite a lot, I presume, in this chat. And I think when you have role models like yourself, ambassadors, people coming into school, teachers, parents, probably the best way to encourage reading is just to talk about books that you like, and let people show that you are a reader. If you go up to a young person and say you should read, it's not really particularly valuable, and it's certainly not as eloquent as the message that is sent by someone just saying, I was reading a book, Jamie Johnson book last night, I really enjoyed it. And then a kid might say, I know those books, and you're in a conversation. You don't have to do the preaching. So that's great.
Yeah, it's just about kind of sharing what you like. Yeah, brilliant. So I've got a few questions for you. We've also asked some members of the public, some of the young people of Sussex, to send in some questions for you as well, which I've managed to whittle down to 3. I'm going to ask you at the end to pick your favourite. And I think you've got a signed copy of the kickoff to send to them, which would be great. Fantastic. And also we've got a bit of a challenge, a Jamie Johnson themed challenge that you're going to set towards the end as well, which would be great. So guys, stay tuned for that. So I think I'll just launch into the questions, if that's okay, Dan. So first of all, why did you choose to write about football, and how did you get into writing?
I chose to write football because I felt that there was a bit of a gap in the market. This was in the in about 2003, 2004, Harry Potter was just getting humongous. And everyone's got different tastes. And funny enough, my taste is more realistic than fantasy and wizards and spells. But in really rudimentary terms, I thought, well, a series of books about a kid trying to be a wizard has done particularly good business, been really, really popular. What about, bearing in mind how popular football is, what about a series of books where we in a way use that same platform? We follow a kid trying to be a footballer, but we really follow the whole journey from school all the way through to being in an academy, to getting into the first team, to playing for your national team. And we follow it all the way. And I felt as though I had a unique insight, because previously I had worked in football at the Football Association for 7 years, watching football, you know, and talking and advising and covering football from grassroots through to World Cups. I'd been fortunate enough to go to 2 World Cups with the England team, be there. I was the in-house journalist, the in-house editor at the FA. So it was my job to watch with as close an eye as I possibly could three international tournaments, as I said, 2 World Cups, 1 European Championships, with the likes of Gerrard and Beckham and Rooney. And with that in my mind, and also I used to write the FA Cup final programme and interviewed people like Wenger and Ronaldo and Ryan Giggs. With all of those experiences in mind, my job, I felt, was to make these books, if I was going to write them, the most realistic and exciting portrayal of what a journey might be like from school to the World Cup.
Yeah, fantastic. And you can tell, having read the books, that you've got that kind of insight, especially when there's talk about agents and things like that. So you've got that kind of in-depth knowledge that you get across, which is good.
Yeah, it's I guess you could say my whole life has been research, because, you know, love football, and since leaving the FA, I've done a lot of work with the Premier League. I've also done some work for FIFA. So everyone you meet in around the world of football, and in your life really as an author, but as I've been so involved with football, everyone you meet, you're thinking, oh, can I use that? Your antennae are, you know, is that a character or an experience that I could put into a story? It doesn't have to be exactly like it is in real life, but as you know, it's such an incredible canvas, and so rich with drama and real stories. In a way, you don't have to make up too much. You just have to mash it all together and make sure that you've got the suspense and excitement to make sure that you grab your reader from the first page and keep them there for the whole book.
Yeah, great. How did you find reading and writing when you were at school? Was it something that came in easy to you, or something you struggled with?
Yeah, I struggled from it. Even literally writing letters. I can remember I needed like a tutor because I couldn't work out the B's and D's when I was really young. I couldn't even write the number 8 correctly. I remember this lady saying, her name was Mrs. Tipping. I used to go and see her, and she used to say, just do 2 circles on top of each other. You don't have to do the whole squiggle in one. And yeah, I remember kids at school I felt much more gifted than me, and have greater imaginations. And I thought that because I couldn't make up new worlds about science fiction or different kind of aliens, I thought that I couldn't be a writer. But of course, there are different ways and different types of writing, and I've understood that I can actually write quite well by observing and keeping things realistic, and that is, you know, just as valuable a form of writing as fantasy and science fiction. So it's been a bit of a progression. Football's been very important because I felt that if I was writing about football, I had confidence. Teachers I've had along the way, one teacher who helped me to understand that you don't have to create perfection first time round, and that it's more of a process. So yes, I went from being someone who found it very, very tricky in every way, and now reading and writing is my whole life. Reading, I used to struggle with the books at school. No disrespect to this book, but we were told to read Goodnight, Mr. Tom when I was about 9 years old, and I just found it depressing and to be honest, boring. I'm not again, I'm not criticising the book, but I wasn't up to it. And it's, again, took me a long time. Football helped too. Fever Pitch came out when I was a teenager. I was like, oh, what? This is a novel and I can enjoy it, which was a revelation for me. And I guess that's what I bear in mind when I'm writing the stories. I'm trying to write the kind of stories that I would have wanted to have read, because when I was at school, maybe apart from the old Roald Dahl book, the odd Roald Dahl book, I would get a book and I would just look at the words, and I'd get to the end of the paragraph and I'd realize that my mind had not ingested them. They hadn't gone in. And I'd start again and the same thing would happen. You do that 3 or 4 times and you become frustrated and think that all books are boring, or even a punishment was the case. Sometimes if I was talking too much at school, a teacher would say, Daniel, shut up, go and read a book. So, you know, I had a negative view of it, and I like to think that that's one of my roles, either through writing or visiting schools or working with great organisations like yours, to try and, if there are people who have that same impression, to try and turn it around and show how fantastic books are, and they're like the best friend you could ever imagine, and also your passport to whatever you want to achieve in life. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, brilliant. I think something that sticks out about your books is how much detail you go into with the characters, and I think you've really tried to work hard to make sure that the reader builds that relationship with characters. Often with sport books, that takes a bit of a while to come through, but happens straight away with Jamie Johnson. Is that something you kind of you focus really hard on when you were writing them?
That's really good to hear, and thank you. And I would say, yeah, my definition of a good story, whether it's one that I'm writing or watching or listening to, really is, do I care? Have I got any kind of link to these characters? If I care about the character and what's going to happen to them, as I say, whether it's a film I'm watching, a TV program, or something I'm writing myself, then I'm interested, then I'm engaged. So, yes, in my books, if Jamie Johnson scores 20 goals and wins the World Cup, but you don't care about the character, I don't see what good that is. For me, that's not a story. It's just a statement of a fact kind of thing. So yes, I think maybe subconsciously, but you picked it out. The most key element for me about a story is, do you care about the characters?
Yeah. Our first question that I'm going to pose to you was sent in by Patrick, who's asking about characters. Actually, he says his favourite is Glenn Richardson. My favourite is Duncan Farrell. And maybe a side question just before Patrick's is about whether you base your characters on real players. I've got an idea who I think Duncan Farrell might be based on, but I'm not sure whether you do base them on real players.
Yeah, so Duncan Farrell is a Scottish striker Jamie Johnson plays alongside, and he is a complete loose cannon, but is incredible on the pitch. And I think there were a few different, I read quite a lot when I was writing that book, which was World Class, when Jamie Johnson plays in the World Cup. And I read about Alf Ramsey's World Cup winning team. I read a book about that. And I think there was a couple of elements, a couple of players in that led to this character, Andy Farrell. But yes, probably the two you might be thinking about, which is certainly true, Andy Carroll as a very big target man, who's also capable of, you know, having a very interesting, he's had a quite interesting life story. And Duncan Ferguson being the archetypal big Scottish number 9, but also incredible player, but just someone that you cannot tell what to do. They have to make their own decisions, and you can maybe just guide them. So yeah, and then Glenn Richardson, I guess probably someone like Glenn Hoddle, but brought into the modern day. You know, just an exceptional playmaker, and you know, I love the idea of just someone who, even the way they strike the ball is a kind of poetry.
Yeah, brilliant. You got it bang on. They were the two players I was thinking of for Duncan Farrell. Yeah. Um, Patrick's question was actually, who is your favourite character that you've invented in your books? Have you got one?
I guess I probably have to say Jamie Johnson, because that's me living out my football dreams and exploring some of my own demons and challenges as well through him. There's also, if you remember, a character manager called Raymond Porlock, who Jamie plays for when he's on loan, and he's got a bit of Neil Warnock in him, who makes me laugh. The character of Mike is very important. I think that's sometimes, you know, the relationship with a grandparent can be really, really important in someone's life. It's the same in Unstoppable. Kane with his grandmother has a very strong relationship. So I think for Jamie, Mike is the person he needs, and then his best friend Jack is someone, I guess, who I didn't have in my life when I was growing up. And I think, again, sometimes girls can see things differently to boys, and you need that different viewpoint to help you understand things better. So she's fantastic. And there's a character called Hugo Bogston, who was only in one book actually, called Born to Play, which was it's a little taster, a prequel, and he doesn't really appear in the rest of the series, but he's become really, really big in the TV series. And so I take quite a bit of pride from that. And I always just loved his name. I remember when I thought of his name, Hugo Bogston, I was like, that's a winner. And so I'm glad he's had a life of his own too.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Hugo Bogston, what a name. So my next question that also got sent in by Izzy, who says she loves the books and the series. She's obsessed with them. She said, was there a long-term plan for the books, or did it kind of change as the book developed?
Firstly, thank you, Izzy. Secondly, I think it's only now that I look back and I realise I was really lucky that I knew the plan for the books, just as a kind of amalgamated extent of the experiences that I'd had. I started working in football when I was still at school. I did work experience at Radio 5, at Arsenal, at Sky, at ITV. And so by the time I came to write the books, I had, you know, let's call it 10, 15 years of experience of football and footballers. And as I say, it's only now when I'm looking to write different things and I go into publishers and I try and sell them an idea and tell them my vision, it's a big challenge. But I remember when I was telling publishers the idea for Jamie Johnson, they had the first book and they said, are there any more? And I just reeled off the whole arc of Jamie Johnson's story, how it was going to go. And you could see their interest rising, because they thought, okay, well, if we're going to invest in this, and we know there's, you know, another 6, 7, 8 books coming, well, that's something we can get behind. And I remember my agent saying that was a really good pitch. So yeah, I'm really fortunate, and it's only now that I realize how fortunate that Jamie Johnson's story came to me almost in its entirety. And then what I needed to do is chop it up into each singular book and make sure that had its own story within it.
Brilliant. I think one thing that I find that sometimes children struggle to do is actually with the planning. And I guess you were lucky in that it kind of all came to you. When you actually come to planning a book, how do you go about that? Do you use a mind map, or do you just start writing and see what happens? Or
I think the first port of call is to just free your mind from any filters and any demands and expectations. And like I said, the idea that you're going to sit down and create excellence, to rid your mind of that. And then let anything that is in your mind come out, just empty it completely, even the most terrible ideas, get them down on paper, commit them to paper. And then once you've got something there, you can say, well, that's terrible, I'll lose that. That's quite interesting, I'll extend that. That maybe would be better if we flipped it on its head and said, actually, instead of them being friends, they should be twins. And I like to try and end up with maybe a 2 or 3 page summary of what the whole story is going to be. And then each line might then be, effectively it might be a chapter, and I don't know how many lines in a page, but let's say you might end up with 50 chapters, something like that, from a 2 or 3 page synopsis. So I always like to know where I'm going to go. Having said that, I think it's important to say to yourself that if it's not flowing for you, if you're not enjoying it yourself, that you can change things, that you don't have to stick to the story just because it's what you wrote down. You should be able to say, well, this story is going to benefit from this, and even though it's not part of my plan, I need to accept that the story is going to be better if I go with that.
Yeah, so constantly changing, constantly adapting. And yeah, I love what you said about it doesn't have to be amazing when you first start writing it. It's about just getting it down on the page.
That's it. If we accept that, it takes the pressure off us, and hopefully we feel liberated, and that's where the mind is at its most creative.
Brilliant. So our next question was sent in by Tom. So thanks, Tom, for your question. He said his favourite book's World Class, and it's got him excited for the World Cup, which is brilliant. And he said, how did you adapt the books for the TV series, and how involved were you in that kind of process with the TV series?
Yeah. I love writing World Cups as well, because, as I said, I had so many stories in my head from these 2 World Cups that I'd been to with the England team, which was the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan, where Beckham mania was, it was like being with one of the Beatles in Japan. The coaches would be chased by thousands of people. When we got back, we were invited to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen, and Downing Street to meet the Prime Minister. And so, and then 2006 in Germany, when Rooney was injured and came back, and so many stories. So I loved writing World Class and finding a home for those stories. In terms of the TV, it was quite incredible, really. The Jamie Johnson books had a big first flourish, and then they went a bit quiet. And then they came back again because I was doing so many school visits that on those visits, I was talking to loads and loads of kids, and we were connecting over the books. And so then they came up again from the grassroots, from the schools. Lots of people were talking about them, teachers, or if you're working for a club, often the clubs will use those books. And so they were getting quite a good reputation. And I started to get emails from readers saying, can we have a Jamie Johnson TV series or film? And I said, well, yeah, that would be great. First thing that happened was a producer came over from Hollywood and said, yeah, we're going to make it into a film. I just got to do the deal with your agent. And that was the last I ever heard from that person. And then another production company called Short Form Film took it on, and they were incredibly persistent, because ultimately in this country it's really mainly the BBC that have got a budget in order to be able to make a top class, brand new, original drama for kids. There's not many other places. And this production company, Short Form Film, were talking to the BBC. And in the end, I said to the kids who wrote to me, you know what, why don't you write to the BBC and tell them you want a story? Meanwhile, we were talking, you talk about mind maps, we were creating all the characters for TV and the storylines and their arcs. It's called like a Bible of how it would look. Finally, after maybe 2 or 3 years of conversations, the BBC said, you know what, we'll do a 3-part miniseries just to see if there's any interest. And so we did an open casting, which I was heavily involved with, to try and where we found the kid who plays Jamie, which is a boy called Lewis Dunn. We worked with an acting school in Nottingham where there are kids who are not stage school kids, but working class kids came in, and we found Patrick, who plays Dylan Simmons, who's I think really a future star of acting. And that 3-part miniseries did really well. And it's now, I would say, possibly the biggest British kids drama series on TV. If you look on the iPlayer most popular, it's on there so often. So I was very heavily involved at the beginning. Less so now because it's got its own momentum and it creates its own storylines now, because the books, as you know, are very focused on Jamie Johnson, but the TV show is more of an ensemble about the whole cast, and each cast member needs to have their own storyline. So now I kind of let them, the BBC know what they're doing, the production company know what they're doing, the actors are terrific. I've said what I want to say because there are 8 books there for people to consult my view on it. And I'm just like, I guess it's a bit like feeling like a proud father watching a child go off and achieve something brilliant.
Cool. Yeah, great story into how that happened. So you had an interesting route into becoming a children's book author, having worked for the FA and being a journalist and things like that. From kind of your experience, what kind of pieces of advice, little nuggets of advice, would you give to someone who's maybe at primary school or secondary school who wants to be an author or writer?
Firstly, great choice, because I can't think of anything better, really. Like, I think it's a kind of magic. You start off with nothing, and through your mind and the workings and extended application, you end up creating something that actually exists, that you can hold in your hand, that can travel all over the world, that can genuinely change people's lives. So I'd say it's a great choice to make. And I would say that there are many different ways to write. Like I said, I understood that I didn't really have the capacity or mindset to write fantasy and science fiction, but that's okay. Also to understand that you won't get it right the first time. So with Jamie Johnson, I was rejected by every single publisher in the country for 3 years. So that's a real test of yourself and your belief. After 2 years, I wanted to give up. My mum had a friend who'd once written a book and had it published, and she wouldn't let me give up. So I think, if there are people around you who believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself, that's a lovely feeling for any of us in life. And as I say, those 3 years were terrible for me, but vital, because that was me learning how to be an author. And I guess that's what I would say is great, and write as much as you can, because that's your training. It's not really like being a teacher, where you go to teacher training, or being a pilot, where you have to complete your exams and you get a license. It's something where you just have to keep writing, keep trying to get better and better. And if you're lucky, because it really is all luck, it's all judgment and opinion. Who really knows if a book is brilliant or not? Again, famously, J.K. Rowling was rejected lots of times. I mentioned the Beatles earlier. Famously, they were rejected by record labels. So you've just got to have a bit of luck that someone who is in that position of making the decisions about commissioning a book likes your book. But it's, as I said, it's that word like. It's not factual. This is going to be a bestseller. It's, I like this book, and I think maybe other people will too. So I would say to keep all those things in mind. And as you and I were discussing, for me, good stories are ones where you care about the character. So I would keep that front and center in your mind.
Brilliant. Some great advice there, and definitely sharing your writing with whoever you can, your friends, your family, and not being afraid to share that, because you never know, they might think it's brilliant, and then all of a sudden that gives you the confidence. So yeah, brilliant. Okay. So what are your plans for the future then, Dan? Will there be a comeback of Jamie Johnson of any sort, or what are your plans?
Yeah, I think a Jamie Johnson in the future would be really nice. I've obviously got loads of ideas because he lives there somewhere. I think maybe not right now, because I think the TV series is doing so nicely at the moment. It might be a bit confusing to have a novel about him being older and then him on the TV at a certain age. So maybe that for the future. And for now, Unstoppable is still quite new. And it came out in paperback just before the lockdown. So I do want to spread the word about that. I think it can be quite an important book for kids and teenagers who have had struggles in their lives. As I said about Kane and Roxy, whether it's mental or physical, Kane gets involved with a gang because he's so angry. Knife crime is involved in the story as well. So I think this is something I want to get out there and talk about. So that will be a focus. And then I also have some other ideas which I need to go back into that same process of hopefully trying to convince publishers that they're good stories. And if anyone agrees with me, then you'll hear about those when they come out.
Cool. How can our viewers find out more about you and your books?
I think the website is the best place, danfreedman.co.uk. Yeah, lots of information. Now I've also made it possible for people, if they want to get a present or a special memory, that you can get a signed book on there, which is quite nice to have that from the author. And so yeah, there's quite a lot of background information, and if there's a contact form if you want to be in touch, danfreedman.co.uk.
Cool.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Brilliant, Dan. So I posed 3 questions to you earlier. So we had the questions from Patrick, from Izzy, and from Tom. Can you do any stick in your mind as being your favourite to have won the signed book?
I would probably say let's go for Tom. He liked World Class, didn't he?
That was Tom, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you and I have bonded over World Class a bit today as well. So that seems to be the book of the day. So let's go for Tom.
Fantastic. So congratulations, Tom. A signed book will be coming your way. But thanks to everyone who sent in the questions, for you 3 guys, but also everyone else who sent in questions. That's great. So I believe you've got a bit of a challenge as well that you can set our viewers as well. A special Albion themed one.
Well, yes, Brighton is very close to my heart. I spent a lot of time that my dad was born there, and then my grandmother used to live there, so really close to my heart. And of course, Jamie Johnson is too. So I thought we could maybe challenge the young people of Sussex to write a story where both Jamie Johnson and Brighton Hove Albion are involved. Perhaps maybe Jamie plays for Brighton at some age, or maybe against them, or another way that you can think of. And that would be, I think that'd be a really nice story to read. I'd like to see a story involving those 2 fantastic forces in football, Brighton Hove Albion and Jamie Johnson.
Cool, that's a great challenge, especially with the summer holidays coming up, that children can have a go at. So yeah, let us know, let Dan know on social media as well, what you come up with. That would be great. And you can contact Albion Community on social media and on our website as well. So fantastic. Dan, thank you so much for your time. You've given us a great insight into what it's like to be an author. So much detail and some great tips as well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Fraser. Keep up the brilliant work. You know, it's a fantastic football club in a fantastic area. And yeah, I know how important, you know, that badge on your shirt, you know, when you go into a classroom and you meet someone, it may be the same messages that a teacher or parent is trying to convey, but the power of the badge, the power of the football is fantastic. So yeah, keep being that force for good.
Brilliant. We will do. Thank you at home for joining us as well. Enjoy that challenge, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.